Let me find out for sure.
All right. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the San Francisco Board of Supervisors Land Use and Transportation Committee meeting for Monday, March 6, 2017. My name is Mark Farrell. I'll be chairing this committee. I am joined by our committee vice chair, Supervisor Aaron Peskin, as well as Supervisor Katie Tang. I want to thank the clerk of our committee, Mr. Victor Young, as well as Annie Kawanami and Philip Jackson from SFGTV for covering today's meeting. Mr. Clerk, do we have any announcements?
Yes, please silence all cell phones and electronic devices. Completed speaker cards and copies of any documents to be included as part of the file should be submitted to the clerk. Items acted upon today will appear on the March 14, 2017 Board of Supervisors agenda unless otherwise stated.
Silence all cell phones. Okay. Thank you for reading those rules. Mr. Clerk, could you call item number 1?
Item number 1, ordinance amending the Downtown Support Special Use District to authorize a monetary contribution to satisfy required on-site open space requirements, exclude certain features from the floor area ratio and gross floor area calculations, and dedicate the monetary contribution for lighting and safety improvements at Victoria Manola Draves Park.
Okay, thanks very much. So at the request of the project sponsor, or the ordinance sponsor, I should say, we're going to entertain a motion to continue this item until March 20th. But before that, colleagues, if no questions, I'd love to open this up to public comment. Anybody wish to comment on item number 1? Seeing none, public comment is closed. Supervisor Tang?
I'll make a motion to continue to March 20th,
Yeah.
2017.
Okay, motion by Supervisor Tang, second by Supervisor Peskin. We can take it without objection. Mr. Clerk, would you call item number 2, please?
Item number 2, ordinance amending the commerce and industry element of the general plan to update the guidelines regarding overconcentration of eating and drinking establishment in a single area.
Okay, thank you very much. Supervisor Peskin.
Thank you, Chair Farrell and Supervisor Tang. So before we get to the substance of this matter, I just wanted to kind of raise a couple of procedural issues. First, and I'm not pointing a finger to the current chair because I think we were in the period of transition, but this has actually happened on another recent general plan amendment. I'm not sure if you were chair yet or not, but as you know, we have 90 days to accept or reject them. And lately what's been happening is that they come right at the end of the 90 days. And in this particular one, I think it was approved by the Planning Commission on December 1st, transmitted to us during the holidays on December 22nd. And then, of course, there was a transition of committees and what have you. But, you know, as a result of that, we don't actually have the opportunity to have very much of an in-depth hearing because this has to go one way or another as a committee report for tomorrow's board meeting. So it's not the kind of thing where we can ask a bunch of questions and continue it a week. So that was just one procedural thing, which is as to these general plan amendments, when they come, as they do from time to time, it would be really neat if we could schedule them after, I don't know, 60 days or 30 days or 45 days. So that's just one kind of comment for the committee. And I was actually kind of thinking about the fact that planning sent it on December 22nd instead of maybe December 2nd, but given the fact that we went dark on December 15th, maybe they were doing us a favor. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. The second issue is really more to planning, which is the last time one of these came along, when it got to the full board, we actually rejected it at the full board. Again, we were up against a timeline, but at that time, I tried to suggest to planning that amendments to the general plan are pretty weighty, lofty things, and that there should be more extensive outreach, particularly to members of the Land Use Committee. Maybe they reached out or not, I don't know, but that meeting has yet to occur. And then I am happy, after we hear a staff presentation, to raise a series of policy questions as to whether or not this is necessary and the best public policy, but I'll reserve that until after planning's presentation.
Thank you, Supervisor Peskin. And to your comments about scheduling, I agree with your sentiment. As now the chair of this committee for the past 4 weeks. I think we were doing our best to schedule anything that needed to be with due haste so we could actually have the chance to discuss them before they are approved without our discussion. But to our planning department, let's work on that moving forward, certainly for the next 2 years. With that,
Thank you, supervisors. And just to respond to Supervisor Peskin, I did reach out to each one of your offices and met with your staff to go over this. I think I did it probably a month ago with Sunny Angola in anticipation of such a situation. And we did try to get it earlier, but again, scheduling was an issue, and the Small Business Commission really wanted to hear it. I'm glad they did. They did recommend approval, so that was worth it. But let me get on to the presentation. So, good afternoon. Aaron Starr, Manager of Legislative Affairs. The item before you is a general plan amendment that would remove specific numeric concentration standards from the commerce and industry element, which are used when eating and drinking uses, such as restaurants and bars, seek conditional use authorization. Some of the controls, however, would remain in the planning code. So just a quick refresher on this. I'm sure you're all pretty familiar about the general plan and the planning code, but the general plan is like the city's constitution. It sets goals and policies that are the basis for the city's land use decisions. A general plan is required by the state of California. It's official city policy of the city and county, so it is mandatory. It's not just advisory. And changes to the general plan can only be initiated by the commission, but the board and mayor do have final approval. The planning code is the city's land use implementation document. The planning code contains specific controls, such as numeric controls, that are intended to implement the visions outlined in the general plan. The planning code must be consistent with the general plan, and the board, mayor, or planning commission may initiate changes. So this update would amend the commerce and neighborhood commerce section of the general plan's commerce and industry element. The proposed changes would remove specific numeric controls for restaurant concentration from the general plan. As you can see in here, the strike-through language, more than 20% of the total occupied would be replaced with an over-concentration of, so removing the specific numeric concentration and making it more general. And then below, removing the 20% and directing the reader to the planning code to actually find the percentage required. And then it was also remove language that calls out specific neighborhoods for greater concentration and overly prescriptive spacing requirements. So that language would all be deleted. However, similar language, numeric controls would remain in the planning code, where if needed, they can be adjusted to better respond to concerns for individual neighborhoods. So implementation impacts, planners would still evaluate the concentration for eating and drinking uses for CU applications. Instead of 20 and 25%, it would be 25%. Instead of evaluating the concentration for the entire district, which is called on the general plan, only the concentration within 300 feet would be calculated. And concentration levels will only be used to inform the department's recommendation and planning commission's decision. Other CU findings, public support or opposition, and other factors would still be used in evaluating conditional use applications. So a little background on the commission action and outreach. The Planning Commission recommended approval of this on December 1st of last year. The Small Business Commission recommended approval on February 27th of this year. The department did hold a general outreach meeting on May 9th of last year. We attended the Coalition for San Francisco Neighborhoods membership meeting at their request on July 19th of last year. They didn't really have very much significant comment on it. We also reached out to the Golden Gate Restaurant Association. They were generally supportive, and we did meet with representatives from the Telegraph Hill Dwellers on October 24th, 2016, based on comments they made to the initial Planning Commission hearing, because North Beach is called out specifically in the general plan. The response we got from them was that they would just prefer to keep the specific percentage in the general plan and not delete it. So just in summary, this ordinance reinforces the role of each document, the general plan as a policy document and the planning code as an implementation document. It allows concentration levels to be adjusted to fit the needs of individual neighborhoods. Calle 24 is a good example of that, if needed. It provides a more meaningful metric for concentration levels and ensures that the eating and drinking uses are more evenly distributed throughout the district, and eliminates the need for planning staff to survey the entire NC district in order to provide an overall concentration. And that concludes my presentation.
okay, thank you, Mr. Starr. Colleagues, any questions or comments?
Sure.
Supervisor Tang.
Thank you, although I know Supervisor Peskin wanted to speak earlier, so I'll let him go first.
Supervisor Peskin.
So I want to just really speak to how the general plan is set up. And if we go to the commerce and industry element of the existing general plan, which I am pulling up, the neighborhood commerce section has a number of objectives and policies. Objective 6 is maintain and strengthen viable neighborhood commercial areas easily accessible to city residents, which is followed by policy 6.1, ensure and encourage the retention and provision of neighborhood serving goods and services in the city's neighborhood commercial districts while recognizing and encouraging diversity among the districts. And then underneath that, there are a set of guidelines. And there is the first set. So remember, you have objectives, policies, and then guidelines for all uses. And then underneath that, guidelines for specific uses, financial services, and in this case, eating and drinking establishments. And there's very specific language that talks to the policies and objectives. And I think we're going down an unnecessary road. I mean, we had a very fine-grained general plan, and the whole notion that, and you've heard me say this before, that one size fits all, I think is a dangerous road to go down. There is a reason that, for instance, North Beach has a higher concentration called out in the specific guidelines, and I underscore the word guideline, because North Beach has and continues to be, and I appreciate it, a destination dining and entertainment zone, and that's why it has a higher percentage as compared to other neighborhood commercial districts. But I think this one-size-fits-all is not the right road to go down. And then the notion of over-concentration, and while Section 303 and the conditional use stuff that Aaron Starr talked to does exist in the code, there's really no definition of what an over-concentration means in the general plan. And I, for one, I just don't see that this is necessary. We are all in receipt of a email sent, I believe, yesterday from the Middle Polk neighbors by their president, Mo Jamil, that speaks to these issues. And I, for one, just don't really understand why this change to the guidelines for specific uses, and again, underlying guidelines is necessary.
Supervisor Tang.
Thank you. I hear Supervisor Peskin and what he's saying, and I actually felt the complete opposite. But let me just clarify one thing first. So under the neighborhood commerce section, we eliminate the percentage requirement. However, if we are looking at eating and drinking uses and you're considering, say, a CU, then you're still going to look at the concentration of commercial storefront, and that percentage is at 25%.
Correct.
Okay,
Concentration.
I think that the CU part is what has really been a huge hiccup for some of our businesses in District 4, at least. And I know, again, one size does not fit all. I do agree with that statement. And I think that that's where this 25% actually has kind of come into play in a slightly negative way for neighborhoods like ours, where we actually do want more restaurants. We do want more concentration. This, for example, 25% came up when we were talking about like a 2-block commercial area, and one of the wonderful restaurants that was going to help revitalize a part of our district almost got caught up in this, right? So for me, actually, I think eliminating the percentage is actually really important. And then, as you can see in our next item in Land Use Committee, we can have, whether it's a special use district or other specific controls tailored to particular NCDs or districts, you can put in more stringent requirements to prevent the overconcentration where I think that might be necessary, such as in the Mission or wherever else. But in neighborhoods such as the outer ones, where I'm actually trying to attract more restaurants to come out there, I think not having that percentage, even to be looked at, even if it's not a hard line for what the planning commissioners decide on, it's helpful to eliminate for our purposes. So again, I see how one size does not fit all, but in my personal opinion, I would like to see the percentages removed even for the CU requirement. But I know it's an up or down vote, so I'm not going to try to change anything right now.
If I could respond through the chair. So I don't really see it as a one-size-fits-all. I see it as taking something that is making one-size-fit-all and allowing more variation per neighborhood like you're talking about. So in the future, if you wanted to sponsor an ordinance that changed that concentration for your districts, you can do that. But right now, we're sort of tied by being consistent with the general plan, and so this allows that to happen.
May I just, one last follow-up question is why did you keep the 25% consideration for the CU process for the eating and drinking uses?
We're just trying to maintain that control, and what we've actually found is that restaurant concentrations throughout the city are usually much higher than 25%, so that, in fact, is an outdated number to begin with. We'd like to go back and sort of evaluate more with more outreach and per neighborhood and see what an appropriate number is. And if that is, one number throughout the city, then fine. But if it is more nuanced and allowed for different variation in different neighborhood commercial districts, then that would be the outcome.
Okay, because I mean, personally, I would like to see the, for the CU requirement for eating and drinking uses, if it could somehow mirror kind of what you did with the neighborhood commerce section, in terms of just saying, looking at the balance, we understand that an overconcentration could be threatening to the community instead of putting even a 25% commercial frontage component. I don't know if that's possible to consider.
It is, and our office would be happy to work with yours on perhaps drafting language to that effect.
Thank you.
Supervisor Peskin?
Yeah, I was going to say this is a little bit like the formula retail discussion where you have some neighborhood commercial districts that ban it, some that require conditional use, and other areas of the city where it is permitted as of right. So what I want to make sure is that the underlying admonition in the general plan supports having a diversity of uses and businesses in a commercial area. So, I remember the old formula retail discussions. There were some supervisors who were dying to have formula retail come to their districts, and there were some supervisors who had already been inundated by formula retail and wanted to see no more. So what I want to make sure is that the underlying admonition in the general plan respects that. And so I want to make sure that this is not being turned on its head. And if folks on Terraville or on Irving want to see a higher concentration of restaurants, I absolutely respect that. I just want to make sure what the dangerous road that we're going down is, and I say this as the District 3 supervisor, is that the general plan has had specific guidelines that specifically call out a neighborhood. This is actually a little bit of the problem that we had over the last general plan amendment that came here that specifically called out Chinatown, and this one's specifically calling out North Beach. So the road that I'm worried about going down is this seeming need by the department to take out neighborhood-specific references that are there for a reason, because indeed, North Beach, starting in the 1990s, and this has actually all been statistically proven, has seen the loss of, and this is not just because of zoning, this is also because of the Amazon effect, although that wasn't the case in the 90s, has seen the loss of oodles of neighborhood-serving businesses, whether it's the shoe repair store, whether when I first moved to North Beach in the late 1980s, there were 3 hardware stores. Fortunately, actually, interestingly enough, and this is a parable, the last Board of Supervisors actually rezoned the old Rossi's Market to be a restaurant, and lo and behold, it is, thank God, now our latest Cole Hardware in San Francisco. But we want to have zoning that maintains those kind of neighborhood-serving uses, and that is how somehow, years ago, North Beach got its designation in the general plan. So I'm saying, why do we have to take that out and make it a one-size-fits-all solution?
Supervisor Tang.
Thank you. And to those comments through the chair to Supervisor Peskin, and I suppose also to Mr. Starr, is there a way then, if this particular reference to North Beach is removed from the general plan, that there could be some particular control that Supervisor Peskin could later introduce specific to North Beach that would actually maybe have the same exact requirement in there, so that it's not housed in the general plan, but maybe it's just a legislative zoning change or something. I don't know.
Yeah, it could. And you can introduce an ordinance to do that and make a specific concentration and have that language for North Beach. I will say, though, originally when we brought this to the Planning Commission in October, we did not remove the language for North Beach because representatives from North Beach came out at the hearing taking exception to the language in there. Then we proposed to move it. We didn't come to a consensus with North Beach or the Telegraph Hill dwellers. They just wanted the percentage left in, but they were, from my understanding of the conversation, they weren't comfortable with their neighborhood being called out. So I wasn't, the staff that did that outreach, unfortunately, has moved on to Oakland, but that's what I understand from the meeting. So.
I honestly do not know the history of it. I was able to find in my records this morning a letter that I was copied on from October, and I have not been able to actually speak to the author of the letter, Stan Hayes, but he does not seem to say that they wanted North Beach taken out. At least that's not how I read the letter. They do raise another interesting thing, though, Mr. Starr, which is that they believe that this whole discussion is inextricably linked to the pending changes to Article 7 of the Planning Code, and thought that it would really be better if they were heard together. But that option is not before us, as our 90 days actually expires on March the 24th, which does, subject to public comment, we could continue this for a week and then send it as a committee report, because that would still give us 2 readings on the 14th and the 21st. So we do have that option if we want to try to noodle between myself and the department to figure out how to get this right.
Okay. Colleagues, any further questions or comments? We'll open this up to public comment. Anybody wish to speak on item number 2? Okay. Seeing none, public comment is closed. So just in terms of my comments, and I appreciate the dialogue here, you know, from my experience in the district that I represent, I actually tend to side with Supervisor Tang here, that not having as much specificity on the general plan and being able to include specifics in the code, I think is, from my perspective, the way to go here. Not all districts is created equal, but neither are the different commercial corridors in each district. And so being able to do that, like we're going to do, potentially here with item number 3, if this is mode going forward, I think it's fair. And to Supervisor Peskin's comments about taking out an area of that he represents out of the plan right now, if you will, and replacing it, appreciate that concern and comment. Obviously would anticipate that there would be legislation followed pretty closely here. But I do think having that flexibility, I will say one of the first things that we had when I first came in office was there was a ban on new restaurants in Fillmore Street in District 2, and we lifted that ban. That was the first piece of legislation that actually passed here at the Board of Supervisors, because it was causing, there were so many empty storefronts. And I think the changing nature here is something that we want to be able to, I would rather have in the code itself and be able to amend it that way, rather than the larger general plan amendments. And again, to Supervisor Peskin's comment, I do think that the changing nature of our retail corridors is, judging by the volume of cardboard that my family disposes of increasingly every single week, from whether it be Amazon or other places, especially as parents of 3 young kids. And as your Supervisor Ronan, does not experience it yet, will experience it soon. I do think our retail corridors are going to be ever-changing for the foreseeable future, given this trend. So I'd be in favor of putting it forward, certainly to the full board. I have no problem putting it forward with no recommendation if that would make a difference at all. But I am mindful, that there is a potential dialogue to be had, and we'll see where our colleagues are on the Board of Supervisors tomorrow. Supervisor Tang.
Thank you. So I am also in favor of having the general plan language be more broad. I think that even the language that's in the neighborhood commerce section was, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe it was based in a point in time when a study was done and showing that restaurants were actually, again, very threatening to our communities. And while that might be true in some neighborhoods today, still in others, I think it may not be. So again, I like the broader language in the neighborhood commerce section. I will look forward to working with the planning staff on further changes to the planning code regarding CUs for eating and drinking uses. I actually don't really like the 25% commercial frontage language still in there, but again, we can work on that next. And then I would, again, just in response to Supervisor Peskin's issue about particular neighborhoods and needing certain things, I agree, and that absolutely I think we could follow up with further legislation to codify certain requirements for particular neighborhoods if need be. So I'm ready to move this forward with positive recommendation today. And I'll make a motion then to send this forth to the full board with positive recommendation.
Motion.
As a committee report.
I assume there's no second. I'll be the second. Roll call vote. Mr. Clerk, we had a motion. Could we do a roll call vote on that motion?
Yes, the motion is to recommend the matter as a committee report to the full task force to be heard at tomorrow's meeting. On that motion, Supervisor Peskin.
No.
Peskin, no. Supervisor Tang.
Aye.
Tang, aye. Chair Farrell.
Aye.
Farrell, aye. The motion passes. This matter will be recommended to the task force as a committee report to appear on tomorrow's Board of Supervisors agenda.
Okay, motion's approved. Mr. Clerk, would you call item number 3?
Item number 3, ordinance amending the planning code to create the Cali 24 Special Use District and revising the ordinance, and revising the zoning map to reflect the Cali 24 Special Use District, generally bounded by 22nd Street, Potrero Avenue, Cesar Chavez Street, and Cap Street, as well as 24th Street to Bartlett Street.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Clerk. So this item was sponsored by Supervisor Rowan in the mayor's office, looks like. And I know Supervisor Rowan has been working on this for quite some time.
Yes.
Before even taking the seat on the Board of Supervisors, so I'd like to turn it over to her.
Thank you. Thanks so much. Thanks for hearing this item. I see many people here from the Calle 24 Cultural District, the Latino Cultural District, and I thank you all for being here. What I like to say is that if the mission is the heart of the Latino community, then Calle 24 or 24th Street is the center of that heart. It's the special place where parents drop off their children at Mission Girls and MEPI youth programs, where Presida Eyes takes people on tours of the striking Balmy Alley murals, where friends gather for brunch at St. Francis Fountain, and where artists exhibit their cutting-edge work at Galeria de la Raza. These are just a few examples of why the Board of Supervisors in 2014 designated the area surrounding Calle 24 as the Latino Cultural District. This body recognized the significance of the Latino Cultural District to the city's rich history and culture. And while the Latino Cultural District is a special place, it is also an area facing the brunt of the city's affordability crisis. When we talk about affordability, we often think about housing, but small businesses are also being displaced at rapid clip that is changing the very nature of our neighborhoods. The legislation that the mayor and I co-introduced and that is before you today is a critical tool in helping us preserve the character and vibrancy of the San Francisco's Latino Cultural District. For the first time, we are using land use tools to articulate what characteristics we would like to see in new business coming into the neighborhood that has been in turmoil because of widespread displacement of longtime residents and businesses. I'm pleased to share that both the Planning Commission and the Small Business Commission unanimously voted in support of the Calle 24 SUD legislation, including a minor amendment that I will soon explain. Through the SUD, we seek to preserve what makes the Latino Cultural District an attractive and dynamic commercial zone. The SUD sets aside up to 1/3 of the corridor for eating and drinking establishments and makes room for other types of businesses like retail and personal services that neighbors rely on. And the SUD welcomes new businesses that support the rich Latino history and character of the area and are committed to local hiring, working collaboratively with other businesses, and supporting legacy businesses like Dance Brigade, Dance Mission that have contributed to the neighborhood for over 30 years. This SUD is just one tool in a much larger toolbox of strategies to enhance the corridor. Soon you'll hear from the Office of Economic and Workforce Development about the Invest in Neighborhood initiative, which provides a broader array of support and incentives to the corridor. Colleagues, I have one amendment that I will ask for your consideration and adoption. After consulting with the zoning administrator, his office suggested that we clarify that limited restaurants seeking to become full-service restaurants are made exempt from the concentration controls. That was always our intention. However, the zoning administrator thought it would be important to make the exemption explicit. I would like to give special thanks to Diana Ponce de Leon, who's here today, Lisa Pagan, Joaquin Torres, and Francis Chan from the Mayor's Office of Economic and Workforce Development, Diego Sanchez from the Planning Department, Eric Arguello and Moises Garcia from the Calle 24 Council, and Marlena Byrne from the City Attorney's Office, and Sheila Chung-Hagen from my office for their long time incredible work on this piece of legislation. Colleagues, thank you so much. I'll ask for your support coming forward, but I would like to call up Diana Ponce de Leon and Diego Sanchez to do a brief presentation before questions.
Good afternoon, supervisors, and thank you, Supervisor Ronan, for that introduction. I'm Diana Ponce de Leon. I'm from the Office of Economic and Workforce Development, and I'm going to provide a presentation today to provide you with some context and background of what has led to the development of the Calle 24 Special Use District. As you heard Supervisor Ronan mention, it's really a collaborative partnership between the city and the community. So Calle 24 is part of the Mayor's Invest in Neighborhoods initiative. As some of you may be familiar with, we have 25 corridors around the city that we focus in. It's an interdepartmental initiative. We work with departments to develop a strategy and work with the community on informing that strategy of what to prioritize and what to work towards to create healthy, economic, vibrant commercial districts. So I start with a graphic of the boundary, and there's one thing that I want to clarify with this, is that there's two boundaries that have been mentioned. One is the Latino Cultural District, and a separate one, which is what is proposed before you today, is the Calle 24 Special Use District. The main difference, here you see that in the blue is the Latino Cultural District. The SUD excludes properties facing Mission Street. There will be an analysis that we're undergoing through MAP 2020 to look at the characteristics of that corridor, and it's seen as very different in scale and diversity in comparison to those within the 24th Street Special Use District. I also want to note that the regulations before you are only to apply to commercial properties. So some of the characteristics within this area vary between the small storefronts, the Latino art, the murals, the institutions, the services they provide, small businesses, the diverse offerings of goods and services, the affordable neighborhood, the affordability of those goods, the history of waves of immigrants, Latino immigrants, but different waves throughout the years. It's really a working class neighborhood and has been since its inception. And we have many businesses who actually still own their property that possibly started off living in the building and running their business from the ground floor. And many of those have been running for generations. So what makes Calle 24 unique? Of course, we have the concentration of Latino cultural heritage assets, which is why it was recognized as the Latino Cultural District. But it's also, it's a special place because of its history, its small businesses, and the cultural significance. It's a place where many generations of working class have found refuge in San Francisco. And while we have a high concentration of these Latino heritage assets, there are also many other characteristics that describe it today. Efforts to preserve or retain these assets and what makes them unique does not mean freezing it in time. It doesn't mean we are overlooking improvements, public safety, or cleanliness. There are many examples around the city of special use districts or commercial districts that have developed their own set of regulations to preserve their existing character and protect their assets from market trends. Chinatown, North Beach, and even within the Mission Special Use the Alcohol Special Use District. So part of that character, we actually have a pretty high concentration of businesses that along 24th Street that have been in the neighborhood for more than 30 years. This is only a handful of them. We have about 22 of institutions currently that have been serving this neighborhood for more than 30 years, and 4 are currently on the legacy registry, with 1 on the way. So while the cultural district is a historic and cultural asset, it's also a way that we are using it as an economic strategy. The attraction of arts, culture, events to the area create a natural uniqueness made up of businesses, institutions, and residents. It creates an experience that cannot be replicated by internet retailers, and creates an opportunity for the area that may lessen the challenges, as some of you supervisors mentioned today, that retail faces today. The cultural district then becomes a catalyst for attracting more creativity, attracting visitors, and creating opportunities for workforce and connections across economic sectors. So this is a timeline from when, through Invest in Neighborhoods, we began to work with the neighborhood. Each of our neighborhoods has a neighborhood profile. We conduct a community assessment. We customize the services based on the priorities of the area, and we go ahead and we implement programs and services. The Latino Cultural District has been part of this and is one of the programs and projects that the neighborhood prioritized to be implemented. And we've supported that and worked collaboratively with them on that. The resolution was passed in 2014 by the Board of Supervisors. It was recognized, and while this was symbolic, the next step was to look at what zoning appropriate regulations could be put in place to preserve some of the character that exists within this neighborhood. So it's been about 2 years in the works. The special use district is only one of many tools. It doesn't solve for many of the challenges, but can be used in conjunction with existing services to mitigate these. In general, the services and support provided by Invest in Neighborhoods can be split into 2 categories. One is business strengthening, and the other is the enhancement of cultural assets. I also want to make the point that this is not just coming from the city, it's not just coming from our departments in terms of the services that we can provide, but on the ground you have the capacity that is growing of the Calle 24 Latino Cultural District as a steward of these services, the priorities that they have also heard along with us from the neighborhood. So they have committees set up to also look at the issues and be engaged with land use, quality of life, economic vitality, and cultural assets and arts, which is in addition to everything that the city has provided collaboratively. Currently, the storefront retail mix on Calle 24, we have a total of 182 storefronts from Bartlett to Potrero Avenue. The retail makes up 23%, eating and drinking is currently at 32%, personal services 34%, and we have a level of vacancy of 11%. However, this 11% is a combination of those that are actually advertised to be occupied, and some of them are under construction or so we have 8 that are actually available for lease. This chart shows a general trend of increase in eating and drinking and a decrease in other services. It seems moderately spread out throughout this period, 1992 to 2014, which demonstrates a stability of the other service areas. So over time, it's been increasing, but not at a huge rate. As you can tell, here we've had some decrease in groceries, increase in dining, and some decrease in professional services, but at a rate that is seen pretty healthy up to this point. In the pipeline, as far as new restaurants, we can expect 4 new ones, 2 that can occupy previously existing restaurant spots, and 2 that will be taking the place of previously existing retail spaces. So this slide demonstrates all the information and more that isn't on here that has shaped the SUD and what went into it. We've looked at pros and cons and argued back and forth and looked at data. We've looked at emails. We've reviewed, had meetings in the community. And so this represents over time of this time period of 2 years that what has gone into it in order to get us to this point. So to maintain the diversity of businesses via use type, these are some of the things that we want to accomplish with the zoning regulations that we're proposing. To maintain the diversity of businesses, to protect the small storefronts, protect existing retail spaces, protect legacy businesses, and promote the prevailing character that makes the Calle 24 SUD. So while at the beginning we spoke about the richness, the Latino heritage, there's more. This speaks to beyond what makes up 24th Street. So in those comments and that community input that we collected when we asked people what makes 24th Street, these were some of the things that make it what it is today. So with that, we looked at, okay, so if these are some of the characteristics that really kind of make up the essence of the Calle 24 Special Use District, what can we put in place to help mitigate and create a balance of what is currently healthy, we believe, in the corridor? One of the regulations proposed is to institute an eating and drinking establishment concentration threshold of 35%. As you all saw before, currently it's at 32%, so there is a little bit of room. There's 2 potential areas where restaurants could go, new restaurants would be able to go in. And by that I mean those that will change the existing potential retail and professional to restaurant. So this would not prohibit new restaurants from coming in. They can still occupy existing eating and drinking establishments. Those are grandfathered in without triggering the 35% threshold. So we're also proposing to trigger conditional use authorization in 3 cases. One is in the merger of storefronts. Currently, there's an interim control that completely prohibits the merger of storefronts. Through community input, one of the recommendations was that it become a CU rather than a storefront merger to allow for flexibility on that. The second one is require conditional use authorization for a business that will occupy a previously existing location of a legacy business. The third is to require conditional use authorization for medical service, which those types of uses tend to be appointment only and closed off to public. And what we want to build upon the traffic on the street, the pedestrian traffic and other uses. This map is just to give you a sense of scale of the 35% threshold. We'd be looking, it follows the CU model in terms of measurement, which you all were discussing earlier in terms of 25%. It's the same type, it applies the same measurement calculation. So you would be looking at from a proposed spot to turn a retail space into an eating and drinking establishment within 300 feet. You would look at that concentration, and if it exceeds 35% by establishing that new business, then you wouldn't be able to turn it to an eating and drinking. And this is just to give you a sense of that scale, what that would look like. So here is a list of existing conditional uses in the gray. Those are all that are currently existing. We're not proposing to change those, with the exception of the storefront mergers. Currently, we don't feel like the 2,499 is appropriate for 24th Street. That means that most mergers would be over the counter, and they would be allowed to merge two storefronts without going through conditional use. So we've lowered it to the appropriate scale of 799, which means that any small storefronts that are merged would have to go through conditional use authorization. And as I mentioned before, the other two that we're proposing to add through conditional use is medical services and the for any business that is proposing to occupy a storefront that used to be occupied by a legacy business, unless it's vacant for 3 years. So if it's been vacant for 3 years, then that's abandoned. They don't have to go through conditional use authorization. So as part of the conditional use, we are proposing additional findings on how a business can contribute back to the district. It must meet 4 out of 6 proposed findings. These represent some of the aspects that are important to the character of the special use district. They represent many of the things that our businesses are already doing and what new businesses will be encouraged to continue. For example, retailers that partner with local artists and jewelry makers featuring and selling their products provide a variety of products that are affordable to a variety of households and income levels. We have several examples in the corridor of those that are partnering with each other, providing space for local entrepreneurs to use their kitchens as commercial kitchens and be able to cater and grow from that. I also wanted to provide an example of the allowing of change. This chart is about, it's 18 different business changes that have happened over a 2-year period that I was able to recollect. None of these would trigger any additional regulations, those that are being proposed today. The new businesses will be able to come into the corridor, and businesses will close and change over time, as they have done. On average, the business turnover between 2003 and 2014 is about 9 a year. So this is pretty standard, what you're seeing here. Much of this is also impacted by leases and terms, possibly. But yeah, so there is room allowed for change within these regulations that are proposed today. So this is just an example of, you know, a barbershop will be able to become an art gallery and vice versa. There would be no additional restrictions placed on that. While the proposed regulations are not a silver bullet and zoning has limitations, the SUD is one tool to help strengthen and maintain some of the elements that are so special about this district. We believe we found a balanced intervention informed by extensive community and city dialogue. Some believe that the regulations are too much, while others believe that it doesn't go far enough. As a public entity, we have an important role to listen and to find the common goals that unify us. It's an approach that we believe that greatly benefits the cultural and economic vibrancy of our neighborhoods and defines the character of our city. This diagram recognizes the strengths, the challenges, the opportunities, and above all, the common goals for the areas, as we have heard it in the neighborhood and in many meetings from many voices. In the center is our commitment through Invested Neighborhoods and the actions we are taking to support and build upon the special assets within this area. A vibrant corridor that is unique, safe, and preserves the cultural history and provides goods and services to the local community while sharing it with visitors. The regulations contained in the proposed SUD are limited and balanced. They will not solve for public safety, dirty streets, or freeze everyone in time, or prevent many businesses from leaving or coming. They focus on retaining very specific characteristics that zoning can regulate, that preserve key elements that make this area so special. They allow for change and provide an opportunity for businesses to contribute back to the area. We ask you to support these measures, and we look forward to answering your questions. But before we go into questions, I want to introduce Diego Sanchez from the Planning Department, who will provide a summary of the Planning Commission's discussion and recommendations.
Good afternoon, Supervisors. Diego Sanchez with the Planning Department staff. Supervisors, on February 9th, the Planning Commission heard the proposed ordinance and the reason why staff supports the land use controls in this ordinance. Overall, Supervisors, the controls seek to maintain the 24th Street corridor's vibrant, distinct character and its neighborhood-serving qualities. For example, as you've heard, the eating and drinking concentration controls build on existing planning code controls for assuring compatibility with the surrounding neighborhood. Where existing planning code controls draw concern at a 25% threshold, the SUD would institute a prohibition at 35%. This is being proposed to help maintain a diverse set of neighborhood-serving uses to prevent any one type of use from dominating the corridor and to maintain the distinctive character of the area. Requiring conditional use for the replacement of a legacy business also addresses the need to maintain the area's distinctive character. The contributions of legacy businesses were recognized by the city first in creating the Legacy Business Registry and then by its voters in the passage of November 2015's Prop J. The city's general plan also makes explicit mention of the benefits of longtime retailers that they provide upon a neighborhood corridor. In this spirit, the SUD proposes to extend land use controls to deter the displacement of legacy businesses. Similarly, the smaller storefronts found in the area also contribute to neighborhood character and provide a diverse offering of retail goods and services. Requiring a CU assures that their loss is indeed found necessary and desirable, as well as compatible with the neighborhood. Because certain medical service uses, such as a dentist, a chiropractor, an acupuncturist, these tend to close by early evening or see customers only by appointment, pedestrian activity may suffer from a glut of these types of uses. Requiring the medical services to secure conditional use provides another layer of analysis that will help assure that the new uses contribute to pedestrian activity along the corridor. As a reference, this has been done in other NCDs, for example, the Castro, 24th Street Noe, and Upper Market Street, where certain quasi-office uses that may not lend to a free-flowing pedestrian activity were made to secure conditional use authorization at the street level. Finally, the SUD proposes that all requests for conditional use also be found compatible with the 6 stated purposes. These are used to help to assure that new uses seamlessly integrate into the corridor and contribute to its character. The SUD explicitly recognizes that achieving these stated purposes will be a multi-agency effort between the Planning Department, the Mayor's Office, and other sister agencies. Supervisors, at the February Planning Commission hearing, public comment was overwhelmingly in support of the proposed SUD. The Planning Commission deliberation largely echoed this support as well. There were concerns about the implementation of the 6 purposes. Staff recognized these concerns and reiterated the multi-agency effort between the Planning Department, the Mayor's Office, and other agencies will be required to realize the goals of this special use district. Supervisors, the Planning Commission voted unanimously to favorably recommend this SUD to the Board of Supervisors with an amendment to exempt existing restaurants looking to add alcohol service from the proposed eating and drinking concentration controls. That's the same amendment being offered by Supervisor Ronan. This concludes my presentation, and I'm available for questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, colleagues. Any questions or comments? Supervisor Ronan?
I wanted to just take the opportunity to call up Commissioner William Ortiz Cartagena from the Small Business Commission. I see you here, and if you have any remarks to add on behalf of the Commission?
Just to add, we heard this, I believe, last week on our last session, and we're totally in favor. You know, I do have a bias because I was born and raised on 24th Street, so I've seen the changes. But this is one step, and this is exactly what we need in our district. So thank you, Supervisor Ronan.
Thank you, Commissioner. Okay, so let's open it up to public comment. And I have some cards here. Sam Moss, Chirag Bhakta, Scott Weaver, Gabriela Lozano, Rodrigo Duran.
Good afternoon, Supervisors. Hope all is well today. I'm here on behalf of Mission Housing Development Corporation. I'm the executive director and one of the largest landlords of 100% affordable housing, certainly the largest in the Mission. We fully support what's being before the board today and the Calle 24 Cultural District in its entirety. Mission Housing has thousands of square footage of commercial spaces along 24th Street, and we do believe that all of the issues being discussed and the proposed solutions to them through, tireless and countless hours of community organizing are extremely beneficial for the 24th Street corridor. So in that regard, I do just want to reiterate that we support what's going before the board today. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Good afternoon. My name is Gabriela Lozano. I'm one of the owners of El's Cafe located on 24th Street. It's the corridor that is in question in this session. My business has been in the neighborhood for 11 years now. Compared to the rest of the businesses in the area, my business is in its infancy. It is family owned and operated. My parents support themselves out of this business. I am here standing before you to ask for your full support on these measurements, as without them, my business will disappear in a few years. And it is very important for me and for my family and for the neighborhood that businesses like ours, small and family-owned, remain in the neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Next speaker.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Rodrigo Duran. I am here representing Carnival San Francisco. It is a multicultural festival that's been happening for 39 years now, and it sits and happens in the heart of this special use district. I think our theme this year is very relevant to this conversation. It's the heart of San Francisco. And without these small businesses, Carnival San Francisco and events that happen in the Mission District would not be able to exist. El's Cafes is a good example with Gabriela. We support each other. We have been supporting each other for 39 years now. And, especially for folks who would like to see these commercial regulations change, there are places in San Francisco where they can execute their plans. Valencia Street is a prime example of where, for example, they would want to go. Just to conclude again, we would like these regulations to take place. We need and we want these small businesses to remain affordable. We want them to be neighborhood oriented, and we want them to be culturally relevant to the Mission District. Gracias.
Thank you.
Hi, good afternoon, supervisors. My name is Chirag Bhakta. I'm born and raised San Franciscan. I am also with Mission Housing. I also want to thank Diana from OEWD, Supervisor Ronin's office, Eric, Moises, John, Mary, and everybody else who actually made this possible. I've been working for a lot of years to do this. We, of course, are in full support of the Special Use District. As Sam mentioned earlier, we have property on 24th Street, including Section 8 residential properties, and the residents there do want to make sure that the businesses around them are thriving. These are obviously much-needed regulations, not only ensure the cultural aspects along 24th Street, but it also helps protect neighborhoods serving small businesses and preserves the physical characteristics of a vital visitor destination as well. In addition, many of the businesses employ a lot of local residents, so there's even an economic incentive to safeguard this one-of-a-kind, legendary San Francisco district. Lastly, as in a time of increased open xenophobia within the American political landscape, it is a civic duty on your part to proclaim directives to safeguard the Latino cultural district, especially in a gentrifying city. We must be willing to enact sensible stabilizations during a time of crisis on both a local and national level, and we ask that you pass this unanimously. Thank you.
Thanks. I want to call up a couple other names: John Mendoza, Ruth Mahaney, Marie Sorensen, Eric Arguello, and Henry Karnilowicz. Hi.
My name is Scott Weaver. I'm from the San Francisco Tenants Union, the Calle 24 Cultural District. I'm asking first that you honor a commitment that you made 3 years ago as a board to, quote, stabilize the displacement of Latino businesses and residents and preserve Calle 24 as the center for Latino culture and commerce, and enhance the unique nature of Calle 24 as a special place for San Francisco's residents and tourists. I'm asking that you honor that commitment today. This is really the first piece of legislation that's come before you specifically related to this particular area. I'm also asking that you honor the process that has been undertaken over the last 3 years to create this special use district, which is actually the first step in a multi-pronged approach to reach the goal of stabilization on Calle 24. It has involved numerous community stakeholders, probably over 20, probably half a dozen community meetings, participation by OEWD, which has been totally tremendous, as well as the planning department, which has also been tremendous, and the various supervisors from District 9, which you've had over the last 2 years. So I'm asking also that you honor that process. And I'm asking that you honor the small businesses along the 24th Street corridor who are having very difficult time surviving and have numerous challenges ahead that the modest commercial controls that are proposed here today will at least help to alleviate those challenges. So thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Supervisors. Corey Smith on behalf of the San Francisco Housing Action Coalition. We've been participating in these conversations for a long time. I personally went to a lot of MAP 2020 meetings, so I thought it was important to come up here and say something. The organization has no position on the special use district. We believe that transit-oriented development is one of the best things we can be doing, and the 24th Street BART station is a good hub for that. We also recognize the value of communities, and truthfully, one of the most special neighborhoods and most unique neighborhoods, not only in the city of San Francisco or even along the West Coast, but in the entire world. So there's a lot of differing opinions and priorities here, and we certainly respect all of that. We share the utmost concerns, I imagine, with everybody in this room here today regarding displacement in the Mission District. It's one of the things that we need to be actively figuring out how to mitigate. And one of the ways that we believe we can be doing that is by advocating for housing in the outlying neighborhoods and around the Bay Area as a whole. It will relieve the pressure on the Mission District, on the current tenants and the current housing stock we have there, and hope that is a place we can come together and work together in the future. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning, Supervisors. My name is John Mendoza. I'm one of the co-founders of Calle 24. I'd like to thank all the work that you've been doing in the last couple of years, and all the ones that you don't see here, the work that they've done. We've been working on this. For me, it's been 20 years. We started Lower 24th Street, which just turned into Calle 24. So I'd like to thank all of those people that have been doing the work before it even got to the supervisors, before it even got to City Hall, to get here. And we've been through planning, we've been through Entertainment Commission with a full recommendation. I would like today for us to go for the full recommendation to the board, just to show respect to all of that hard work that we've been doing, and that this is the way that we should go. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Ruth Mahaney. I am a member of the council by Calle 24, and I have lived in San Francisco since 1971 and seen a lot of the changes that are happening. I also was part of a small business that was located in the Mission for 35 years, and I really want to urge you, please, to support this project, and thank you all for your work. Thanks.
Thank you.
Hi, my name's Marie Sorensen. I'm with Calle 24. The White House announced today a renewal of the immigration ban and the hiring of more border guards. In this day and age, incendiary statements and acts seem to be the norm rather than the exception. This is the reason the Latino Cultural District district designation needs to move forward. The mission's a melting pot of Latino culture. That culture is facing extinction due to rising rents, home evictions, and unaffordability. Nonetheless, this is an exciting, vibrant area. People from all over the Bay Area come to shop, eat, and worship in the neighborhood because it is a neighborhood. We're one of the few places in town that has a neighborhood vibe. Having cultural corridors increases a city's wealth by acknowledging diversity and celebrating all that make us unique. Wouldn't it be boring if all we cared about was cultural uniformity and property values? Please say yes to this. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, supervisors. My name is Eric Argoya. I'm the president of Calle 24 Latino Culture District. And just briefly, who we are, Calle 24 is the birthplace of Latin rock. We're the birthplace of the mural movement, starting with Balmy Alley and the Mujeres Muralistas. We host Carnaval, Dia de los Muertos, Baile en las Calles, the Frida Kahlo festivals in July, and Paseo Artístico. We have the highest concentration of Latino businesses on 12 blocks and the highest concentration of legacy businesses on 12 blocks in the mission. We have been working very closely with the mayor's office and our supervisor, Supervisor David Campos, and Supervisor Hillary Ronan for the last 2 and 3 years working around these regulations. We realize that this is not a magic bullet. It's not going to take care of everything that we need, but we're also, Calle 24 it has just become a 501c3, and what we've done is we've formed committees to deal with a lot of the other issues that are happening in the area. So all of it together is what's going to make this work. We've established a land use committee, quality of life committee, economic vitality committee, and an arts and culture committee. These are areas that the community specified for us to concentrate on, so we'll be doing that with a lot of community members also. We've also hired our corridor manager, Moises Garcia, who's with us here today, who's going to be working very closely with the merchants and working around technical assistance with the merchants and being the eyes on the streets. We hope you can support these commercial regulations. They're very moderate. It's going to help preserve our small spaces, balance retail versus food establishment, and stabilize our rents along 24th Street. So please support these moderate commercial regulations. Thank you.
Thank you. And I don't have any more speaker cards, but if there's anybody else who'd like to speak, please come and feel free to line up. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Supervisor. My name is Henry Kornilowicz. I'm the president of the San Francisco Council of District Merchants Associations. We represent 20 associations around the city, including the Golden Gate Restaurant Association. I think it's very important that we have the Latino Cultural District set up with a special use district. I'm thinking of a place like Japantown. Japantown, I could just see, we wouldn't have it anymore if it didn't have an SUD. And this is an example of what could happen to the mission and to the Latinos in the area. So once again, I urge you to please pass this measure, and thank you very much.
Good afternoon, Supervisors. Peter Papadopoulos, Cultural Action Network. And so I'm here to urge your support with others for this measure. I think that, well, it's many, many years in the making. I think we've all been hearing about this for a long time, so I'm happy to see it moving forward, and we certainly want to thank everyone, Supervisor Ronan and Diego and his department, and Diana Ponce de Leon, who's put in, I think, an immeasurable amount of hours on this over the years, it looks like. So I think there's a lot of great provisions, and I just want to highlight two that I think are important. That is, that this is an additional level of protection for our legacy businesses that I think is really important, because we know they're still threatened even with all we're doing to try to hold them in place. And also, I think this strikes the right balance on restaurants, of trying to keep an eye on what's happening with restaurants. It's sort of a complex picture, but I think that in certain circumstances we're seeing in areas where an over-concentration can have a certain effect, and I think that this wisely steers clear of that with what it does. And I also like that there's a lot of flexibility built into this, even though it has a lot of regulation with it. There's also a lot of flexibility, and I think that that will help this be successful in the long run. So I hope we can count on your support for this. I think it's an excellent measure and a great step forward. Thank you.
Buenas tardes, supervisors. My name is Moises Garcia. I'm the manager of the Cultural District. I'm here because I want to speak to you kind of about the other parts of what the SUD doesn't address, that we know that the SUD is not a silver bullet, but we know there are other many complementary things that we're doing now to help protect the Cultural District. But one thing that the SUD does do is protect our legacy businesses. So while Deanna mentioned that there's only 4 businesses on the registry, I'm actively working to add the additional 20 that are actually on the corridor and surrounding and within the district to get them on the registry to really alleviate that psychological fear of displacement that they feel on a daily basis if they actually don't own their business, they own their property. Additionally, to the 6 purposes that are presented in the SUD, those are purposes that we already work with potential merchants that want to come onto the corridor to really become a part of our neighborhood and our community, and to really see how they can be part of this place that's really special to us. And lastly, the other large part of what we're trying to do is really be that voice for businesses in terms of marketing to bring folks back into this neighborhood who either have never been here or who are displaced, to remind them that this cultural district is theirs and something that they should be proud of, and that they should be able to come home not just for the cultural events, but really for the neighborhood serving businesses that we have. So I please ask for your full support in safeguarding the Latino Cultural District as a beacon of pride for Latinos in this city and as a beacon of pride for the city of San Francisco. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Is there anybody else who would like to speak during public comment?
With that, we will close public comment, everyone. Supervisor Ronan, any further comments?
No, colleagues, I just really appreciate your support on this really important piece of legislation for my district. Thank you so much.
Supervisor Tang.
Thank you, and thank you to Supervisor Ronan, everyone you worked with. I know a lot of heart went into this thoughtful land use policy here, so I'm happy to send this item forward. Actually, first, why don't I propose that we amend page 6, lines 16 through 17, as you stated earlier, and then send it forward to the full board with a positive recommendation as amended.
Okay, we have a motion by Supervisor Tang. I think before accepting the second, I just want to also say thank you to Supervisor Ronan for her work on this over, I know, a long period of time, everyone from the community as well, and would be happy to support as well. So motion by Supervisor Tang, second by Supervisor Peskin. We can take that without objection. All right, Mr. Clerk, do we have any other business in front of us?
That completes the agenda for today.
Thank you, everybody. We're adjourned.